may answer. If a question is directed to a specific team or candidate, all other teams have the opportunity to answer the question as well. As with the other 2 nights, each team will receive 3 minutes for an opening statement and for a closing statement. Teams also have 3 minutes each to respond to questions. Each team will receive 2 rebuttals per question and 2 floating rebuttals that they can also use for questions for a maximum of 4 rebuttals. If you would like to ask a question from the floor, please come up to the table to my left. Mark, who is holding the white piece of paper, will give you a piece of paper where you can write down your question, or you can bring it up on a BlackBerry or whatever. We'll just read through the question, make sure it's okay, and then you're welcome to address it to the candidates. So with that, we'll get started. The first team to open will be RMS.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Jeffrey McCarthy, and I'm running for President and CEO of the AMS.
My name's Sean Renault, and I'm running for the position of Vice President, University Affairs.
And my name is Briar Snefula, and I'm running for Vice President of Operations.
All right, so I'd like to open with a quote. In the end, we are always rewarded for our goodwill, our patience, fair-mindedness, and gentleness with what is strange. Gradually, it sheds its veil and turns out to be a new and indescribable beauty. That is its thanks for our hospitality. Love, too, has to be learned. I remember my first day being dropped off at Mac Brown Hall for my fine arts orientation in 2008. I remember feeling intimidated and most of all out of place. Not having the residence experience and working 2 part-time jobs busing in between, I remember feeling incredibly out of place and incredibly unwanted at Queen's. I held the legitimate fear that this would be a continuation of my high school experience, of being bright but ignored. The thing I remember most about first year is riding the bus. The Fine Arts Lounge was the one place I felt at home on campus. The AMS was the place where you went to get the job title of Fine Arts Exec. But I challenged myself to carve out a new university experience I could call my own. I met a group of students, went house hunting, and settled north of Princess. I lived alone in a strange house that summer and worked 2 full-time jobs to pay the rent. I told my parents I wanted to prove I could do this on my own, and I meant it. I also raised my hand to be a Fine Arts Exec that year, as well as a teach in Con Ed Orientation Week. These were very important experiences for me to grow as a person. I promised to make orientation, keeping it student-run, a priority, because I know it has a lot of traditions, and I also know it's a very important and meaningful experience for everyone involved. Fine Arts has taught me what the university experience should be about. University should be a supportive community where every student should have at least one lasting connection they experience at university, be it participating in orientation week, volunteering in a club, working in a commission you care about, participating in Buick sports days, or pouring a cup of coffee for your peers while supporting your education by having that job. The second we lose sight of what the AMS is here for, to provide as many opportunities for students as it can, and to preserve a tradition of academic quality in a strong community, is the second I no longer want to be a part of it. And I say, when I look at the AMS, there is room for improvement. We are an external team. We are not careerists in politics or corporate management. Sean will be going into clinical psychology. Briar will pursue his intellectual interests in the study of languages, and I will be a high school chemistry teacher. But external does not mean amateur, nor dangerous to elect to positions of confidential trust and authority. In the process of identifying where there is room for improvement and meeting with the current AMS team to refine our ideas, I am proud of how passionate and experienced the current AMS team is.
Time.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Rico Garcia. This is Duncan Peterson, CK Pritchard, and together we are Team GPP. So first of all, I'd like to thank the entire audience for coming here. I think it's great to have these debates, this open forum, to have this level of democracy here at this university. I really hope there's going to be a high turnout this year because it really means a lot. Like the AMS does a lot of things for this university, and we should all be here, and everyone should be informed, read the platforms, and I'm really appreciative of all of you guys being here. So thank you very much. I'd also like to commend the other teams for their great efforts. They've run great campaigns, and it's been great competing against them, and I look forward to the debate tonight. First of all, I'd like to tell a story of how it is that I came here to Queens. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico, and I came here to Queens. I found out about it through alumni who were teaching at my school. They taught me what the Queens spirit was. I came to a summer camp nearby. I toured Queens. I fell in love with the place. But it was really that sense of community that Queens is well known for. When I got accepted to Queens, I got called down to the principal's office. And the first thing you think about is, what did I do wrong? They keep me waiting there in the principal's office, and there's 4 teachers there. And all of a sudden, after about a couple of seconds of silence, they stand up and they do an oil thigh in front of me. I was back at home, Monterrey, Mexico, and I was thinking, why is my principal dancing in front of me? And that's how great Queens is. My former teacher sent me a hoodie about Queens, and I knew that I wanted to belong to this university. Well, this has been the greatest experience of my life, in knowing that the AMS and many of the different extracurricular ways of getting involved with this university is truly the learning place of this university. I met Duncan when he was a commissioner and I was a senator back in Nassau about last year, the beginning of last year. And I met TK at the beginning of this year. And I think we all share a vision of what it is that we want out of student government. We want people to get engaged. We want people to be involved. And we want people to learn and feel a part of that community. And so when it came to time, we were drafting a strategic plan, Duncan and I, and we realized how much more of an impact can we make if we were to do this, the things that we were doing at ASUS, do them at the AMS. And then TK sort of approached us, and we sort of approached TK when we were trying to look for that third person, and it all fell together. And I'm extremely excited to be here with them, and I wouldn't want to be doing it with anybody else. I believe that our platform, we took many months of planning for it. It's realistic. We're running on accessibility, approachability, and accountability. We want people to know that this is their student government, that we're truly working for them as student leaders. And it took us many weeks meeting with people and debating and discussing, and it finally came up to about a 42-page document that is extremely helpful and exciting for next year. It's things that are low cost, they can all be achieved within 1 year, and I truly believe in it. So again, I look forward to the debate, and I truly believe that we have the experience and we have the heart in the right place to lead this AMS. Thank you.
JDL.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the AMS Elections Presidential Debate. My name is Doug Johnson, and I'm the presidential candidate for Team JDL. On my right is Tristan Lee, the VP Operations candidate, and on my left, Mir Deneen, the VP University Affairs candidate. When our team came together about 2 months ago and sat down to discuss our vision, we came across some key themes. We believe that the AMS should be open and accessible to as many students as possible. We believe that students should be able to expect more from their student government, and we believe that students should get more from their student government. Ultimately, we believe that the AMS can further serve its students by offering greater resources while still maintaining and improving the services it already offers. With that vision, we began to draft a platform. We agreed that our platform should be as well-researched as possible and offer many tangible and doable initiatives for the student body. Our research took us to every corner of campus where we met with students, staff, and faculty to gather opinions of the society and Queen's University. This 2-month process resulted in what you will see on our website. 4 pillars, 19 points, focusing on student life, health and wellness, academic quality, and student advocacy. Our platform presents us with a number of challenges, but we're not afraid of challenges. This platform and this campaign, being the first time the 3 of us have worked so closely together, has proven to me and proven to Team JDL that we are willing to push the boundaries. If one day we do 15 class talks, the next day we know we're going to do 16. If one day we talk to 50 students, the next day we know we're going to talk to 60. We're not afraid to challenge ourselves, we're not afraid to challenge the AMS, and most specifically, we're not afraid to challenge the administration. Our platform also presents opportunity. After speaking to students, we realized that students should be able to expect more from their undergraduate experience. By seeking nomination, we presented you, the students, with an opportunity to create change, an opportunity for growth, and an opportunity to make a difference. Most importantly, an opportunity to enhance the quality of your undergraduate experience. Some of what we promise is simple, and some of what we promise is challenging. But know that as an experienced and passionate team, we will not stop until the job is done. Short-term or long-term, JDL wants to enrich your undergraduate experience, and we hope that you will give us the opportunity to do so. Before we sit down and debate tonight, I want to take the opportunity to thank every member of Team JDL. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. Additionally, I want to thank every student that has participated in the election, presented us with your questions and concerns. I encourage you all to participate tonight, and if not tonight, throughout the next 5 days of the election. Read our platform, ask us questions, and most importantly, make an informed vote. We look forward to your questions tonight. Thank you very much.
Before we begin with our first question, I'd like to remind everyone to please hold your applause until all three teams have responded to each question. This help us fit in more questions tonight. And as a reminder, each team receives 2 rebuttals per question automatically. They also have 2 extra rebuttal cards that they may use at any time, and those rebuttal cards are replenished for the second half. Also, rebuttals will be 45 seconds tonight instead of 30 seconds as they have been for the last 2 debates. So our first question is coming from Morgan Campbell, the current AMS president.
Hello, candidates. You all look lovely this evening, and congratulations on being partway through the campaign for this year, and I'm sure you guys are all doing a fantastic job. So I'll lead off with the first question for the evening. The AMS has historically played a role within this university beyond the services it operates for students. The AMS president is also an active member of the University Council, University Senate, and delivers an opening speech at each Board of Trustees meeting. How do you see the current relationship between the AMS and these university governing bodies? What will be your approach to these governing bodies, and how will you use these to the best advantage of the university and students?
Thank you for the question, Morgan. In terms of relationships with the admin, I believe strongly in the principles of empathy and listening. I believe that it's important to present to the admin where students are coming from and why it matters. I believe that when we work together, admin is a lot more likely to listen to us than when we tell them what we want and then expect them to do it. I believe in cooperation, I believe in reciprocity, and I will be a strong advocate for students, and I will listen to you first.
All right, so thank you very much for your question, Morgan. So I guess I'd like to explain. The University Council comes together, I guess, once a year. I had the opportunity of being a part of it in the session that was held in Saturday in May last year, and it was like an extremely exciting experience to look at the long-term plan of the university, what's been happening, and how we want to move forward. The Senate deals with the academic matters of this university, and the Board of Trustees deals with the financial matters. Something that is very critical this year is that there's been a lot of debate about how it is that we're doing academic decisions based on financial matters. The Senate is supposed to have full authority over academic decisions, but how can they do so if they don't have the money given by the Board of Trustees? This was something that was key in the suspension of the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, and it's something that is key moving forward with the projected deficit that the university has. And so I guess the way I see the AMS dealing with those bodies is collaborating with the faculty societies, collaborating with the students that sit on those bodies. Senate has 16 student senators, I believe. Board of Trustees has the undergraduate student representative, undergraduate student trustee, a graduate student trustee. As you mentioned, both the SGPS and the AMS get a chance to deliver a speech at the Board of Trustees. So I believe that the AMS should be cooperating with those students, with the faculty societies, and present a collaborated front. I understand that at Senate, for example, I have an experience being an NASA senator last year. It's a lot of the times the meetings are about 2 hours long, and you need to have a lot more discussion outside of Senate. I believe that student government should be proactive. It shouldn't wait for things to happen to take a matter to the table and react to it. I believe that we should be talking to the students that sit on the different Senate committees that we have and bring them to the table and see, all right, what is it that is affecting our student government? What is it that's affecting students in the coming year, in the coming 2-3 years? And so then sit with them and talk, all right, how are we going to move forward? How can we coach all of these students at large that sometimes are not involved with student government but sit on Senate committees? And so getting them to present a unified front and moving forward with Senate, with Board of Trustees, collaborating with as many students as possible, I think that is the key. I think we can also use AMS Assembly as a more important role in decision making in terms of collaborating with discussion. I think that AMS Assembly shouldn't just be about approving motions and seeing what council is doing and approving that and ratifying that. I think we need to provide that front using President's Caucus, using ASAS Assembly, AMS Assembly, ComSoc, anything. Create those discussions, bring a unified front, and speak for all students.
Thank you for your question, Morgan. It's a very good one. I think I would describe the relationship between the students on the university governing bodies and the administration or the other members of those bodies as a relationship built on respect. They know we're here, they know we basically run the school, and they know that every decision they make has to factor in what we want as students. Students deserve the right to have representation on these bodies. University Senate, as Rico mentioned, has 16 student senators. But you cannot be a representative until you participate. And it takes participation from every one of those 16 senators and every student member of the Board of Trustees to really push what students want at these governing bodies. Team JDL has proven that this year. Myself and Mira, I'm currently a senator on the University Senate, and Mira has worked quite closely with me drafting some motions at the University Senate to protect the academic quality at our university. In terms of the switch to the GPA, in terms of drops on transcripts, and in terms of the switch to ceilidh. We have worked endlessly, tirelessly throughout the year to make sure that this is in the best interest of our students. To wrap up quickly, just one thing I want to touch on, as I mentioned before, is you cannot be a representative until you participate, and Team JDL won't stop until we are fulfilling our representative duties and participative duties on these bodies. Thank you.
I would just like to add that I actually participated in my first visit to Senate on Tuesday, and I'd encourage all of you actually to check it out. They broke off into a discussion where members that are on Senate speak with the people that don't have a speaking role, and it was absolutely fascinating to engage with faculty to see, because they want to understand where students are coming from, and I really encourage you to get involved, participate. You can.
Seems I'm a familiar face here in the early stage of the questions. My question for you today is that all of the teams at some point have touched on issues with faculty societies during the campaign. However, all of you have experience within the AMS, ASAS, and then other affiliated organizations. So I'd like you to elaborate on issues that affect students in the other third of AMS constituents that have little effect on individual arts and science students.
All right, so thank you very much for your question, Mackenzie Dixon. Just to clarify that I understood it correctly, is what is affecting other faculty societies that is not just arts and science? Just
The intention is that is to have things discussed that affect students in all the other faculties, but that don't really have an effect on arts and science students.
Yeah, I think there's many things affecting faculty societies that are not belonging to arts and science students. Key thing, for example, concurrent education students, the change of the GPA system and how they're being graded on a 1, 2, 3, or 4-point scale rather than the regular GPA scale. I realized that the GPA, I guess I can continue on that one, engineering, commerce, a lot of these faculties are graded very differently than arts and science. You see even the same thing between the arts and the sciences. You can't mark the same way you mark a paper, something that is mathematics or engineering related. That's something that's affecting all faculties. I can give specifics. I guess nursing, for example, they always have a very difficult time enrolling in courses when they have to complete different practicums at different hospitals and whatnot. So that's something that's very challenging, getting into courses. That's something why we've developed the course registration waitlist on our platform. We believe that this is something that can happen. It is possible. We've spoken with people in the administration. This is something that actually could benefit engineers as well. I realize that a lot of them, when they try to take different courses within arts and science electives, for example, they're unable to do so because arts and science students get those first. And so those are some of the things affecting students in other faculties, but I could elaborate more, and I welcome any more questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Mackenzie. There are two things I would like to touch on. And the first one, I agree with what Rico has said. However, I would like to take it one step further. Team JDL recognizes that because of the tight schedules of several different faculties and smaller faculties such as nursing, even larger ones such as applied science, getting into electives is very difficult. We want to take this one step further than a course waiting list and actually present to these students a full list of the electives that are available, that fit into their schedule, and that they can enroll in. It's way too hard for a nursing student to navigate all around Solis for hours on end, days on end, to find these available credits. We talked to a couple of nursing students, and the way it works is they all scour Solis endlessly, and if they find a course that's open, an arts and science course that's open that fits into their schedule, they get on the phone and they call every other one of their nursing friends because they know how hard it is to get into them. We want to take that one step further, provide a list that is available to them from the registrar. We talk a lot in our platform about working with the registrar. We have already built a strong relationship with them, and we'd like to see it further. Additionally, these very busy schedules for faculties such as engineering and applied science and commerce prevents students from participating fully in the AMS. It prevents students from holding managerial positions. And if the AMS is really going to touch base with every single student on campus, it needs to be more available to those students. It needs to be able to provide these managerial experiences to students with schedules that are 25, 30 hours a week. That's one thing that we as Team JDL would address if we are elected, and it's something that we really believe in. The AMS should be available to all students no matter what their schedule is like.
All right, thank you for the question. I'm the only candidate here that's not in the Faculty of Arts and Science, and so I'd like to talk about the faculty I am in, which is Con Ed. In terms of problems facing it, larger admissions is one thing I would say. It's jumped up from 110 to, I believe, 170 this year. It's a lot, and it affects the class format of being in Con Ed, where they actually try to use like a classroom setting that you would see in a high school to do group work and such. And I think if that just continues, like, you'll see that disappear, which I really hope doesn't happen. In terms of the GPA system, Rico already touched on that. And I'd also like to talk about the difficulty for me to run at all in this election, actually. There's a form you need to fill in order to commit to having a spot in concurrent education in the following year. And basically what the administrators tried to tell me was that if I apply to go for next year and I win in the presidency, I won't be able to attend, so I lose being in Con Ed at all. And if I lose, then, and I don't apply, and I apply to be in there for next year, then there's a chance that I'd have to wait an additional year. So this is actually very difficult for me to run at all. I had to actually fight and talk to superiors in order to actually be able to do this. And the other thing I'd like to say with challenges in Con Ed for being the AMS president, hopefully, is the Education Student Society seceded from the AMS a couple of years ago and joined the SGPS. So I can't be in my education year and also be in a position in the AMS next year. So I'd just like to say that those are difficulties I'm experiencing, and I'd like to see them changed.
Hi again. So my question is obviously for the presidential candidates. What has been the most difficult decision of this year's executive so far? And what would you have done in the situation if you had been president at the time?
Thank you very much for your question, Adam. I think the most difficult decision that the current executive had to deal with was Queen's Bands. It was a very difficult decision. I don't know all of the details as to how it was handled, but I'm going to tell you how we would have handled it. Firstly, we would have sat down with Queen's Bands and firstly told them that the material found in their song booklets was inappropriate. They need to know that, and they need to know why. We would have taken an educational approach to explain it to them. And we would have sat down with Student Affairs, Queen's Bands, as well as ourselves, to come up with a collective agreement as to what this decision should be. Team JDL is not going to say whether or not we agree with the decision to suspend Queen's Bands for the rest of the year because we don't know all of the facts. We don't know what happened behind closed doors. But we would take we would address the situation as a team, and we would consult as many parties as possible. We understand that Queen's Bands has a very historic past at Queen's University and is essential to the Queen's tradition. With that said, I'm sure it was a very difficult decision, but I know the current AMS executive made the decision with all students and all parties, the best interests of all of them in mind. But as I mentioned, we're not comfortable right now making that decision in front of you because we don't know all of the facts. But I commend the current AMS executive for having to make that decision.
Thank you for the question. I'd agree with Doug there. The Queen's bands was the most difficult call, I'd say, of this current year. Actually, just today, when we were manning the booth, I had someone come up to me at the booth and got really upset, and that was, I mean, it hurts, and I know. What this really comes down to really is your view on information control and how responsible a party is who makes information publicly available is versus the people who take that information and perpetrate an act of unforgivable violence and assault. In the case of Queen's bands, we had a situation where Student Affairs and the university, I believe, released the information and made it public without the AMS beforehand. And then members on this campus took that information into their own hands and committed acts of assault on bands members. The question of appropriate disciplinary action when it's a large group at fault and when it's difficult to single out individuals in that group to place the responsibility on for those infractions is not easy to answer. We condemn both the university's decision to make it public and also, even more so, the people who took that information and committed acts of assault. What is the AMS's role in processes like this for the future? We believe strongly that first and foremost, we must upkeep the principles of restorative justice in our non-academic discipline system. And should the information had already been released before the AMS could hear about it and do something about it, we believe that we should learn from what happened this year. We should give the students that could be at risk resources like Walk Home so that they are safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your question, Adam. I think I'm going to agree with the rest of the candidates here. I do feel that the decision regarding bans was probably the most difficult decision the executive faced this year. In terms of how it was dealt with, from what I understand from speaking with both administrators and people in the AMS, it was the AMS that applied the educational sanctions such as the human rights training that was provided to the, that was demanded of the bans. And I believe it was the administration that was more of the punitive style in terms of suspending them, not allowing them to go to the John Orr dinner or the Santa Claus parade in Toronto, things like that. And just like Jeff said, I think this is a key example of why it is important to keep our non-academic discipline system the way it is. We actually have a point of it on our platform, and that is something that we want to make sure that non-academic discipline is in the hands of students. We want to create those educational sanctions rather than the punitive ones. I also believe that we need to emphasize communication in this whole matter. I feel that it's a matter of sitting down with all parties involved, the university, the AMS, the band members, and talk about what it is that's happening, how it is that we can move forward, how it is that we can learn from our mistakes, move forward, and not do them again. I believe that also another thing that's vital is to not act just quickly. Again, I'm not sure the exact details of all of it, aside from what I've spoken to several people and what I've read in the Queen's Journal and whatnot. But I do believe that communication and not precipitating is a key factor when dealing with any crisis, whether it be bans or anything else. You have to sit in the table and you have to sit down and discuss how it is that we're going to move forward. If we have to take a few more hours to come up with a statement, then we have to take a few more hours. If we have to wait till the next day, then we have to wait till the next day. I know Queen's bans affected the reputation of the AMS, affected the reputation of Queen's. It was in a time when a lot of high school students were applying for Queen's, and that's not necessarily what Queen's is about. I don't believe Queen's is about what came out in the newspapers and the National Post, and I do believe that if we do sit down and we talk about it, how is the university going to be affected, how is Queen's going to be affected, how is the AMS going to be affected, we can move forward with dialogue and education. Thank you.
Mitch Piper, Chair of the AMS Board of Directors. First of all, I'd just like to commend everybody for being up there, so congratulations. My question is with respect to the AMS Board of Directors. I'd just like you to explain, in your role as Chief Executive Officer of the corporation, how do you understand the role and the general composition of the Board of Directors? And what would you do in the case where the Board of Directors passed a motion that you didn't agree with? Start with RMS.
All right, so thank you for the question. As the AMS is a not-for-profit organization, the board of directors is subservient to the assembly, which is the highest governing body. And I believe in my role that I chair the committee, and I also take the minutes. There's a lot of places in the Constitution where I'm taking minutes. And in terms of if the board of directors makes a decision I don't agree with, it's a round table, and I am the chair, but I will make my position known, but I'm not going to veto something if it's clear that every other member thinks something different. In terms of, yeah, that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much, Mitch, for your question. The first part, in terms of composition of the board, I believe there's 6 student directors. 2 of them are 2-year directors. There's 2 non-student directors, David McConomy and Susan Halchfort. To the executive, obviously the directors, the general manager, the corporate secretary, and there's a few committees under that. There's the Finance and Audit Committee, the Management and Personnel Committee, the rep to the J Board, the Governance Committee, and the Strategic Planning Committee. As an executive, if there was a decision that was made that I didn't necessarily agree with, I think I would have to respect the composition of the committee in terms of we have student representatives, we have professionals, we have Professor David McConomy who has years of experience, and you have to create dialogue, try and understand how it is, why it is that they're presenting those things, where you're coming from, where it is that they're coming from, consult with students, as many students as possible. But I think I have to recognize that with this board, with AMS Assembly, with anything that we're dealing with, we're not always going to be having the right decision. We're not always going to be having the answers to everything. And so I think we have to learn from everyone else and take humility and understand, all right, maybe I am not right in this situation. And as an executive, I'm not afraid to do that. I'm not afraid to recognize, you know what, maybe I'm mistaken at this point, and maybe I should let students decide on this matter. Thank you very much.
Could you repeat the first part of your question, please?
In your role as Chief Executive Officer, what's your understanding of the role of the board and its general composition?
Thank you very much, Mitch. I won't go over general composition because Rico just explained it pretty thoroughly. In terms of the role of the board of directors, I see the role of the board of directors as the body that keeps the society financially accountable and financially responsible. It has oversight over the services of the alma mater society, and that also includes the role of the VP operations as well as the 3 service directors that sit on it. It needs to make sure that the entire society is financially accountable. In terms of if there was a decision that happened at the board that I didn't agree with, I would hope that there was enough debate, enough conversation beforehand, and everybody at the table got to put in their opinion. Enough research was done, and because there are enough people that vote on the board, it's obviously in the best interest of the society that this decision was passed if more people voted for it than against it. However, further steps, if I really didn't agree with it, as Rico mentioned, just because you're president and CEO doesn't mean you're always right, but I would further consult with more people, maybe more commerce profs or other people that understand the finances better than I do. As well, I would address the situation, and if possible, I may bring it back to board. I may try to reason with board to tell them what I think is right, and here's why, A, B, and C. It's not enough to tell them there's a problem. It's not enough to tell them here's why I have a problem, but here are some solutions that we can do towards fixing the problem if I do believe there's a problem. With that said, the president is not always right, and that is the reason why they're not the only voting member of the board of directors.
Hi, everyone. So a lot of your platforms refer to accountability. That's what my question is about. At this year's fall GA of the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, USA, there was a position paper on accountability. One of the points, Principle 9, was those whose complaints are not being answered through the standard channels should have access to an independent, objective ombudsperson to help settle their grievance. Would you, as president, be in favor of establishing such a position or an office or something like that? If yes, in what capacity do you see this office operating? And if no, why would you be against it? So would you be in favor of establishing an office or a position of an ombudsperson for the AMS or the university as a whole? And if so, in what capacity do you see this position operating? And if no, why would you be against it?
I'm not sure if I got the exact wording after the office of what, sorry? Just, it's hard to hear on this side.
An ombudsperson, basically an independent, like the USA policy paper says that those whose complaints are not being answered through the standard channels should have access to an independent, objective ombudsperson to help settle their grievance. Do you think an office in this capacity should be formed, or a position within the AMS or within the university in general? And if so, why and why not? I mean,
Thank you very much for your question. I'll be honest with you, I haven't read that position paper that USA has mentioned before, but I will check it out as soon as the debate is over. I will let you know that feedback is extremely important for Team GPP, for the AMS. In order to operate as an institution, we need to be able to know what it is the students need from the society. It is important not to always just take what's good, but I think what is not working for students is what we need to take into account. It's the most important thing. For us, we've been doing it with our campaign. There's been lots of people saying you've been doing a great job, and there's people who've been challenging us, and we welcome them. I've told people who are not a part of our campaign team, part of our volunteers, I tell them, you know what, I know you're a critical person, you're not supporting us, but please let me know what is that I'm doing wrong, what is that we're doing wrong, so we can improve it. I think that that is always welcomed. In terms of the creation of an office, I couldn't give you the specifics because I don't know them, but I do know that within our year of office, no complaint will be unheard, and we will always be responding to any criticism the AMS is facing because we want to represent every single student possible. We realize it's not always going to be easy to make everyone happy, and there's going to be decisions that we're going to have to make that are not going to make some people perhaps be happy with the AMS, but we do have to take those opinions into account. We can't just stick with the status quo and with the majority. We need to take those into account as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. Just quickly, if you don't mind, I'm going to define what I believe an ombudsperson to be. I think it's a neutral advocate, somebody that investigates issues on behalf of students when they can't go to the AMS, the president, CEO, or the HR officer. Basically, as I said, a neutral advocate, and I believe your question is, should we have one? I believe we already do have one. I would say that the rector can fulfill that role. He's right up the stairs. If anybody ever has any concerns, they can talk to him. He is a neutral advocate. One of the problems with that, some may see him as a student. He is also tied to the AMS as an undergraduate student, and there may be some conflict of interest there. So I would encourage that the next step would be dispute resolutions mechanisms. It's an office in Richardson Hall, and the person who fills that role is Harry Smith. He can fulfill this role as neutral advocate. He is an employee of the university. However, his role is to be neutral, and if any student ever has an issue that goes beyond the AMS, that goes beyond the rector, his office is always open to investigate these issues on behalf of the student that has a problem. Additionally, I think the president would then have the responsibility to follow up with it, and if there is a complaint, find out why that complaint was, or why that issue was addressed, and how we can change the AMS to better serve the students.
All right, thank you for the question. In terms of establishing such an office, I would agree with JDL that there are already systems in place, I believe, to address some of that. In terms of within the AMS, I believe the Commission of Internal Affairs is very important. If you have a problem with someone in the AMS, you should be able to go and talk to them to make sure that people are following the rules. I thought it was interesting that in last year's debates, when someone asked, what's the least important commission, or which one would you get rid of first, the answer overwhelmingly was the Commission of Internal Affairs. I would tend to say that I don't agree with that at all, because how could you possibly run a government without having checks and balances? In terms of outside of the AMS, if you have problems, the journal is also a really important resource. It has editorial autonomy that's set out in its mandate. And I believe that it's important to keep that, in print. That came up yesterday, but anyway, that's another resource you can go to. And of course, as JDL mentioned, the rector. There are a lot of different resources for you to go on campus if your needs aren't being met. And I'd also like to think that with our ideal of participatory democracy, you can come to us and talk to us as well. Thank you.
As a reminder, questions can be tweeted to us with the hashtag AMSVote, and we will read them from this desk. Also, please hold the applause until all teams have finished speaking.
All right, so the operations and management agreement that governs the Student Life Center was the result of 20 years of dedicated efforts by successive AMS executives. Now, given that your term, if you're elected, will only be 1 year, how will you, one, continue on the initiatives and things started by executives that have come before you, and how will you ensure that the executives that come after you will continue the proposals and projects that you initiate in your term?
Thank you very much for your question, Jeff. Before I begin, I think I would like to recognize the amazing success that the passing of the O&M is. As you mentioned, it is years of hard work, and it's fantastic that we now have operations and management of these 4 buildings. In terms of carrying on the work that the executive before us done, I think it takes a very thorough transition. And if the current AMS executive, well, clearly if they're as passionate as we are, I think they would be on board for that. Additionally, I think it takes a historical perspective. It's not just what this current executive did, it's the executive before that and the executive before that. And JDL would do whatever it has to find out when these projects started and the history of them since they started, so that we're not going back on anything that has happened in the past, so that we're not trying something that failed once, trying it again, and doing the same thing over again. We need to learn from our mistakes, and we need to make things better. In terms of how we would do it on the other end, should we be elected, how this would happen in March of April of our year, again, it's a very thorough transition process, and we need to provide that historical background. I think if we are creating transition manuals for our successors, it's not just our year that we would reflect on, it's the year before us, and as I said before, the year before them, and the year before them. Historical perspective and a very thorough transition period is definitely integral to maintaining that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. And I'd also like to commend the current executive team for getting that agreement signed and having us with the $1.2 million to spend on the Student Life Center. I'd like to read something from its constitution, actually, that I really thought was moving. The SLC is meant to be a place students can call their own, a place where they can relax and have fun, discover self and others, and build the student governments and clubs that are the vehicles of civic engagement. In terms of what we plan to do with that money, because that's one thing that's important in terms of the Student Life Center, we believe, apart from certain critical changes we think need to be made, such as increasing the size of the Peer Support Center, giving it soundproof insulation, and a confidential meeting area, and a reception area, we want the student voice to tell us how and how much of that money we should spend in the coming year. One thing that I think is a clause in that agreement that people seem to forget is that it's a 3-year term to renovate the JDUC, and my other teams here have mentioned essentially spending all the money now. So we'd like to ensure that the student voice is heard before we spend that money. In terms of transition process, that's very, very important. We will enter into a mentorship role with the current executive to make sure we're up to speed and offer that mentorship role to our successors if elected, to ensure that that transition process continues. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Jeff. I guess to address some of the same sentiments that have already been echoed, I'd like to say that I'd like to commend the executive, but not only this year's executive, the ones that came before in terms of the operations and management agreement. I think it's a great thing. I am aware that it is up for renewal in April of 2013. It's something that we're going to be dealing with. Duncan has done tremendous research about it. He also sits on SLC Council, so I've been quite versed in some of the things that are happening there as well. I think that in order to continue with some of the initiatives, you have to recognize the history that these buildings have on campus. You have to recognize the memorial part of the JDUC was actually built on student dollars, built by students. There was a time when there was a fire, got rebuilt, and this plays a key factor on student life on campus. Whether it be here the JDUC, the Queen Center, it's really the hub of where everything is happening on campus, and that's why it's extremely important it should remain on student hands. I believe that the AMS should be working with the university, with the SGPS, all the stakeholders in the agreement, and move forward so that we can ensure management of the buildings in the years to come. I think that having, for example, control over room bookings, different things like that is something that is essential for our stakeholders, which are students, ultimately, and so those are things that are extremely beneficial. Asking students, what is it we want to do with these buildings? They belong to us. Students before have paid for them, and we have paid for the Queen Center to be built as well. And so we have different projects. I'm sure you guys have read in the journal and whatnot about what we want to do with the JDUC. But again, I'd like to echo that this is a project that came before us. It's a project that's going to continue moving forward. And you have to emphasize on that transition process as well, so that all executive members know that you're going to be continuing on a legacy that has been built before you. You have to see beyond your year, and you have to continue that. Thank you very much.
Hello again. A feature of the president's job is working with the University Department of Communications on joint issues management. The reputation of the AMS and the reputation of the university are separate, but they often influence each other and are conflated by the public. Can you please critically assess the current state of public relations and communications from the Queen's University administration?
Can you repeat that question, actually? Sorry.
Can you please critically assess the current state of public relations and communications from the Queen's University administration? So not from the AMS, from the university itself.
Okay. Well, in terms of the marketing strategy for the university, one thing that I've stumbled across when I was reading up on it is the Queens like to talk about the Queen's brand, the spirit of initiative. I don't like the idea of branding a university. I think that university is a place where people come to learn. It's not a product you're selling. It's an experience. It's an experience of engaging with students, and it's experience of growing as a person, of achieving academically, socially, personally. And I hope that we're not moving towards a culture where the university becomes something a product you can buy. A degree is something you buy. I believe it's something you earn through hard work, and that's my opinion on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Amanda. I know that the university has very strict policies in terms of the Queen's brand, the Queen's logo. So does the AMS. It has different policies. And I think this is key in recognizing that we are two different institutions, but we have to work together. When people think of Queen's, they think of the AMS as well. They think of the logo, but they think of tricolor. And we have to make sure that we're working with them and helping those standards. When I was in a session at University Council this past year, I remember there being a session specifically on the Queen's brand, what it is that we are selling to students, how are we attracting students. And so I think that the AMS can be a large part of that discussion in terms of what we want Queen's to be, how we want to represent Queen's to the media. I know you've been working closely with the communications officer of the university. I know that they have their whole marketing department, they tweet, everything, and so I know that the AMS should be working with them because we recognize that whatever it is that the Queen's brand is affects us as students and how other people view us here in this university. So I do think that we need to be working closely with the administration in terms of how we want Queen's to be depicted in the media, because it will directly affect the way our academic value is given in this university. So those are some of the things that I would like to see move forward, discuss with the university, use their work together. I know they're willing to collaborate and work with the AMS brand, the Queen's brand, and make something that students can be really proud of and that it's going to be helpful to us when we're looking for a job in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Amanda. It seems that every time you open a newspaper these days, there's something negative written about Queens. We receive a lot of bad press. The problem is once these stories are broken, we can no longer control the information flow. Whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on the Globe and Mail or in the National Post, once these become public, we can't control them. The one thing we can do is emphasize the good that happens at Queens. This past orientation week, we had a student bike his bicycle all the way across the country raising money for charity, and he showed up at Queens and there were maybe 100 people there waiting for him. Why weren't there 200? Why weren't there 300? Why weren't there 1,000? Why don't people know of these fantastic things that are happening at Queens? It's because the bad is overshadowing the good. We need to take a stronger stance and emphasize the good that is happening at this university. Additionally, there are a number of questions that we have to ask ourselves as a nearly $16 million corporation. How do we want to represent the AMS? What do we want our brand to be? And how does the AMS fit into the major Queens brand? The way we can answer these questions is to foster a stronger relationship between Queens Communications and Marketing and the AMS Communications and Marketing. I know you've done a fantastic job with that this year and in the past. The relationship has been hit and miss, but we need consistency. We need to take what you and your office have done this year and we need to expand on it. And this needs to start from day one. This needs to start from May 1st or as soon as the communications officer has been hired, and they need to establish that connection. And once they establish that connection, they need to create a plan, a strategic plan for the entire year as to how we want our image, our brand as the AMS to be represented, not just at national newspapers, but in local newspapers. Additionally, we want to make sure that we know that we're on the same page as to how the AMS fits into the greater Queens community and the Queens brand. Not just the AMS, we need to work with the Engineering Society, we need to work with Arts and Science, we need to work with Commerce. All of these institutions on campus are fighting for front page news, and it's often the bad press that makes it there. We need to make a change, and we need to work more with the communications officer of Queen's University, or the communications office, sorry, to emphasize the good. Thank you.
Hi. So orientation week follows a different timeline than most other things at the university, and as such, you will mostly see the execution of Orientation Week 2012 and the planning of Orientation Week 2013. As you may know, both Rosh Hashanah and Eid fell during Orientation Week 2010. This issue was brought to the attention of organizers late in the planning process, and so while accommodations were made as best as possible, the situation was not handled in an ideal way, and some students and leaders were not able to fully participate or even participate at all. This is happening again soon, with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, falling during Orientation Week 2013, so not this coming September, but the September following. This knowledge is available to those setting sessional dates, and the Senate Committee on Academic Procedures has made it clear that moving sessional dates in these cases is not an accommodation they are willing to make. With this advanced knowledge of this conflict, I have two questions for you. What proactive steps will you take to support orientation organizers in addressing this issue? And what do you see as the ideal solution to ensure that the entire first-year class is able to participate in Orientation Week?
All right, thank you very much for your question, Rachel. Orientation Week is something that I think I am very passionate about, and a lot of students also are. I currently sit on the Senate Orientation Activities Review Board, which is the Senate committee that reviews Orientation Week year after year and recommends how it is that we need to move forward as a university, how it is that we need to handle Orientation Week. In our platform, we have Orientation Week being student-run, and we want to continue that. There's five actually, student members at SORB. There's 4 that are faculty members or 1 alumni representative, and the committee is meant to have student representatives there, a student majority, because it is our Orientation Week. I think that this is something critical that we need to take into account moving forward, joining together with the different members of the Senate Orientation Activities Review Board and accommodating what it is that students are going to be requiring. I think that we need to do it as soon as possible, as you mentioned. We can't wait till the very end, because the moment you are done Orientation Week, the moment you start planning for it. I saw it when we hired Angelique Collure as the new head Gale for Arts and Science this year. The moment we were done with Orientation Week this year, we released the applications for head Gale and we began the planning process. It's already something that's on its way. I helped with the planning process with David Colson this summer to a certain extent, and so it's something that I have some experience with, and it's important to try and accommodate the students as much as possible. I am aware of the motion brought forward by SCAP, and I do believe that the way we need to handle this is by consultating with the different student organizations on campus that are in conflict with this, with dates, and we need to talk to them and say how it is that we can accommodate you. We can't be making those decisions because I am not the most experienced in what it is that they're celebrating, what it is that they're going through during those dates, how it is that we're trying to create an inclusive environment. It's very well known in the Spirit of Responsibility document that Queen's University wants to create an inclusive environment for all students. How do we create an inclusive environment when people can't participate because of different religious dates that fall within the week? So that's something that we need to be discussing with those students that are directly affected and develop an idea of how it is that we can move forward so that people can truly feel welcomed here at Queen's. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Rachel. We can't move sessional dates, as you mentioned. However, the composition of SCAP changes every year, and this time next year we may be having a different conversation. With that said, we're not going to wait. What we need to do is we need to write a strategic plan in consultation with our faculty societies and other orientation weeks, and we need to look at what we did last time this happened. We need to figure out what worked and what didn't and why. We need to make a plan for next year, or the next 2 years, sorry, and we need to make a plan for the future. Not just 1, not just 2, but 5 and 10 years down the road. The current ORT coordinator asked this question the other night. Where do you see orientation in 10, 15 years? And I think we need to start thinking about that now. Additionally, we need to make sure SORB, or the Senate Orientation Senate Orientation Activities Review Board, stays a Senate committee. There is some talk about moving it under Student Affairs, but this would make it more jurisdiction of the administration and not necessarily run by students. As well, we need to make sure that each faculty has autonomy in these situations. It's not the AMS's jurisdiction to walk in and tell them how to run their orientation weeks, but we need a strategic plan and we need to make suggestions. How do we suggest, here are guidelines, this is what worked, this is what didn't, now you make the decisions. With that said, every student has the right to orientation week regardless of their religious affiliation, and the AMS needs to plan for the future starting now.
Thank you for the question. I've been involved with orientation on the planning side for the past 3 years, and thank you for bringing that up. In terms of my experience with it, I live with someone who planned nursing orientation week that year, and I can remember the extraordinary level of frustration on the planning side with having already planned and booked spaces and events and such, only to have things changed afterwards. It's unbelievable that we had such an oversight of something that clearly should have been picked up. And I believe it was because some students came forward and said, hey, this is a problem. But we know that now, like you're saying, which is great. And in terms of what we can actually do, we're very crunched up for time in terms of orientation week. But I believe there are some things we can do. Their solution back when that was brought forward last year was to introduce the Capture the Faculty Day, which was sort of a neutral, not faculty-specific reducing interfaculty, improving interfaculty relations, day. And I think that's one thing you could look at. Another thing is, in terms of finers, I know that if you wanted to move it back a day earlier, maybe just have an off day altogether. I know that I've had an exception from Spirit with Responsibility. I know that's up for review right now in RT as well, so this might not be possible. But I know that we move finers back a week, back a day, and if Res Life could do something similar, that might be kind of cool. So that's one idea that I just think might be possible.
Hello. Okay, so I'm Allison Sprout, the current Judicial Affairs Director, so this is about that. The Judicial Affairs Director is the only full-time employee who is not hired by the executive and also cannot be fired by the executive. Instead, the director is solely accountable to the student body via the assembly. How do you believe the relationship between the director and the assembly should function, and how do you envision the relationship between the executive and the director in the coming year?
Starting with JDL.
That's a very good question, and I'm going to answer it as simple as this. The Judicial Affairs Director needs to remain accountable to Assembly. Assembly needs to know that the Judicial Affairs Director falls directly under Assembly's purview, and they need to know that they can call that person to Assembly whenever they need them. With that said, the Judicial Affairs Director needs to be proactive and needs to be at as many as assemblies in case there is ever a question. In terms of the relationship with the executive needs to know that the Judicial Affairs Director is there. They need to recognize the job they do. However, it is not their jurisdiction to go in and start telling them how to do their job. As you mentioned, that falls directly under Assembly. And it is the responsibility of the director to know that. It is the responsibility of Assembly to know that. But they need to remain accountable to Assembly, and they need to constantly update Assembly as to what's going on within the portfolio, what they're doing for the future, strategic plans, things like that. But as I said before, they need to remain accountable to Assembly and not to the executive.
Thank you for the question. In terms of judicial affairs being appointed by Assembly, that's great. In terms of, exec not hiring them, I believe that's a step to keep us more accountable, that kind of thing. I'd like to touch on how non-academic discipline system works a little bit as well. The CAA and judicial affairs, I understand, work very close together. So that's one area where you need to develop a positive relationship. They assess cases and they work really well together. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Allison. I guess I can answer your question by saying that the way I envision the relationship between the executive and the judicial director is very unique compared to the rest of the ones that happen with the commissions, with the services side, you have to recognize that they are accountable to assembly, they're accountable to the students, and it's that way for a reason. If somebody has any complaints or anything filed against the executive, how can you do that comfortably if you know that they're working and reporting directly to them? I think that is one of the reasons for why the relationship should be unique in that sense, that it should be very professional. It should be at hand's length in terms of like we shouldn't be able to be dictating to the director what it is that they need to be doing on a daily basis or anything like that, and they need to be responsible and accountable to the students at large via assembly. It is not the role of the executive to micromanage that position, and it is meant to be that way so that we can be kept accountable, and in cases of any complaints, people can use the system against us as well. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not so much a rebuttal. I'd just like to add something to what I said. In terms of the relationship between the director and the executive, I think one of the major concerns right now is our non-academic discipline and how it is under threat by student affairs of this university. The executive needs to step in. The executive needs to back up our director and help defend this system because it's an integral part of Queen's University. It's an integral part of the Alma Mater Society. The Judicial Affairs Director can't do this by themselves, and they can't do it solely with the help of the Commission of Internal Affairs. This is something the executive has influence on Senate, on Board of Trustees, on any other governing bodies that might see this issue. And where this relationship can further is the executive can stand in, back up the Judicial Affairs Director, and make sure that non-academic discipline system stays in student hands.
This is really short. All right, guys. My name's Kevin. I have a bit of a lob ball question for you. Your opening statements didn't mention the stated expectations and responsibilities of the AMS president. For the benefit of the people of the audience and those watching online, would you please discuss specifically the responsibilities and expectations of the AMS president, how you would fulfill those responsibilities, and then just to vary it up, the specific AMS values you sought to embody in your campaign?
All right, thank you for the question. Okay, so what does it mean to be the president and CEO of the Alma Mater Society? To me, it means to be the face of your student government, someone who's earned your trust through hard work and integrity, and work in your best interests. It means to be an advocate for you on Senate and University Council, and in a large number of committees whose decisions can affect not only you, but students of the future. It means to steward the government and corporate sides of the AMS, to be a responsible leader who can make the difficult call. It also means to be an approachable peer, someone who values your input and can take criticism well and include it in the process of decision making. And thank you for the question.
Right, thank you very much for your question, Kevin. I guess I gotta say that as the role of the president and CEO, the first thing that would come to mind is joining the government side with the corporate side of the AMS. You have to understand that as the president, there's the questions that have come up at each of the debates about riding the divide, and I think that's something that the president can really be doing in terms of joining the government and the corporate side, board of directors, AMS assembly. I know they directly oversee this year, I know this can change year to year, the marketing and the communications office. You are the public relations, you are that image that the AMS has, and so I think that's something that is key and vital of the society. When people think of the AMS, when anything happens, any crisis management, people are going to be wanting that opinion and that image, that interview from the president, and that's something that you have to be working closely with the marketing officer, the communications officer, to ensure that the AMS brand remains intact. I also like to say that the president deals directly with the administration in a lot of the cases and deals a lot with alumni as well. And as Jeff mentioned, they do have a seat on Senate, so I do believe that they should be working with faculty societies. They create the President's Caucus that's supposed to meet on a bi-weekly basis or whatever it is that the different presidents of the faculty societies decide on, and it's a matter of bringing all of those students involved and relating that to both the VPs and the rest of the commissioners, the rest of the services directors, and so you have to take those opinions into account, be a liaison within faculty societies, within the university as a whole, and something that I really like to be as president, it'd be that resource for students, for the people that are working with us, for our co-workers, but also for students at large. We want to have, for example, the open office hours. We believe that if you are going to be a good president of the AMS, students should be able to walk into your office and tell you what they need. And so that's some of the things that we want to do. We want to be open and accessible. We want to be able to protect that image that the AMS has, and we want to represent as many students as possible in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Kevin. I think first and foremost, the most important responsibility of the president is external representation on governing bodies of the university, as we've mentioned before, University Council, Senate, and Board of Trustees. And as I mentioned earlier, you cannot be a representative until you're participating. The AMS president needs to be proactive, needs to advocate on behalf of students, and not just sitting in a chair. They need to give reports, they need to draft motions, and they need to do this in consultation with as many students as possible, whether it be President's Caucus, council, or just the average, or just a student on the street. The president needs to consult, and they need to address as many students and issues as possible and participate on these governing bodies. With that said, the president also has to stand up for students, not just advocate. When you're looking for a president, one of the qualities you want, you need a president that's going to stand up in a room with the administration, keeping in mind that these are professional negotiators, and you need someone that's going to stand up for the rights of students and get the best possible deal for students. And not just students today, not just students tomorrow, but students in 5 years. Because some of these decisions happen now and they're not revisited for another 5 to 10 years. For example, if you look at the switch to Solus, or PeopleSoft as the administration calls it, we need an AMS executive that's going to stand up in that room, get the best possible deal for students that will return the best benefits within the next 10 years. In terms of expectations or what values they would instill in their team, I think trust is a big one. In order for the AMS to work properly, the 3 executives need to trust each other. Additionally, the AMS is not just an executive. There are council members, there are directors, there are officers. Every one of these people needs to be able to trust each other, they need to trust the goals, and they need to trust the values of the AMS. As well, there needs to be some serious leadership qualities in the president. As I mentioned, they need to stand up for students, and you need to trust them that they're going to be a good leader on these governing bodies. And there needs to be a sense of accountability. As it's been mentioned, there is a divide in the AMS between governance and the operations side. You need to remain accountable to both of these bodies. You need to remain accountable to Assembly, you need to be accountable to Board, and you need to be accountable to every single student of the society. Thank you.
My mistake, I missed the second part of your question. AMS values in our campaign. The ideal we're working towards is that of participatory democracy, which is where there's constant communication, free flow of information through all levels of student government. We believe in reaching out to you proactively through our executive live chat sessions, and in terms of our campaign, our banner 4x40 foot, write on it different questions every day, and and we're not trying to appear professional, polished. We are trying to be honest. Thank you.
All right, hello again. I would recommend taking notes. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a long question, so just a heads up, make it easier on everyone. So I have a bit of a scenario question for each of you to weigh in on. So outside the clubs and campus organization fees, our society depends on several student fees for various forms of operation. These fees range from service-specific fees, such as those for the media services in Wacom, to some that are intrinsically important to student life, such as the Sexual Assault Crisis Center fee or the Telephone Aid Line Kingston fee. While our society's policies provide some form of protection for these fees, it does allow for all of our fees, even our own, to go to referendum if 2/3 of Assembly approves of this referendum question. Hypothetically speaking, let's say that Assembly approves of this question, and for a number of possible reasons, the fee is voted down by students at referendum. This referendum loss and the loss of the fee itself means that the future operations of either one of our society's services or an external service that you believe is essential is being threatened. As president, would you support this fee going to the AMS General Assembly, bypassing the results of the referendum if the continuation of this service or essential fee was at stake? Why or why not?
All right, thank you very much for your question, Dan, and hopefully I got the entire scenario that you were describing. I guess, as we mentioned, we saw it at Assembly coming up about 2 assemblies ago in terms of ratifying some of the student fees that were going to be put in the ballot that we're going to be voting on same days as we're voting for the executive. And I think that many of these are extremely important for student life, as were mentioned about the sexual assault line, the telephone aid line, things like that. If it were to come to Assembly and a 2/3 majority were to vote them down, let's say, I think, and I do believe that some of these fees might be completely necessary for the safety of our students. One of the things that I would do would be start perhaps an educational campaign. You have to discuss it with your council, see how it is that you can approach the situation. It's not only going to be a decision of myself, but of the rest of my co-workers. And so if we believe that a service, whether it be an AMS service or an external service is essential for students, then we need to create an educational campaign how it is that this service is essential for students, why it is that it needs to be kept here. Ultimately, I do believe that students are the ones who should decide whether a service should be in existence or not, but it is up to us to educate them and let them know how it is that this service basically touches their lives here at Queen's, how it is that it affects their well-being, their health. And so this is what we can do as an AMS: educate our student population, hope for a high voting turnout, and expect them to make an informed decision. We cannot just let them decide on something without knowing exactly what the implications are, and I think that would be the approach that myself and the rest of my coworkers would take. Thank you.
That's a very good question, Dan, and the answer is simply no. We cannot bypass policy just because we believe it is an essential service. This would set up a precedent for future years, and in the future it may have more detrimental effects than it would have benefits. If we do believe it is an essential service, I believe that the AMS should be proactive in the first place. If we do have additional resources in terms of promoting this fee, in terms of promoting it at referendum, then we should put them towards that. If this is something that council and the executive believes is an essential fee, then we should start before it actually goes to referendum, supporting the fee and letting students know why it is essential, what benefits it gives to students, and why it would benefit them to pay the fee, opt-outable or mandatory, in the first place. If this happened and they did fill out the referendum, like I said, we wouldn't bypass it and go to the AGM. However, we would provide information as to other grants and other sources of funding on campus. As you mentioned, in this hypothetical situation, it is a fee that we strongly believe in. It is a fee that we think provides essential service to the students. And if that's the case, then it deserves a fair shot at all those other grants that are around campus. If you take a look at other faculty websites, faculty society websites, there's tons of money going around at this campus. You just have to look in the right places. And if the executive and council really believes in this fee, they'll do that looking for the people that are trying to pass this fee. They will find these grants. They will help them apply for them. They will tell them what needs to go in an application and what is likely to gain some money. But as I mentioned, no, we would not bypass policy. We'd be afraid of the precedent that this would set for the future.
Thank you for the question. In terms of the specific fees that you mentioned, those fees I believe are really essential to student safety. And if the assembly were to say that to turn it down and it would go to referendum and then it was turned down again, first of all, there's very specific conditions in which an assembly can turn it down. But if students voted against keeping other students safe, I would agree with what JDL said in terms of making students aware of why that fee is important. And if students, again, voted against keeping it in place, I wouldn't cut the program. I wouldn't say, I would definitely consider taking it to the AGM because you're talking about compromising safety of students.
Hi, Jeffrey Ingold, student at large. My question is, as a member of the LGBT community, I was quite disappointed to see the absence of serious attention paid to this community in this campaign. As the AMS executive, you must represent and understand the issues and concerns of all undergraduate students. So I ask you to please explain the most salient issues affecting the LGBT community at Queen's and the steps you will take to address these concerns. Thank you.
It's a very good question, Jeff. Thank you very much. I think one of the major issues concerning the LGBTQ community is that they're not recognized on campus, that there are very many resources for people that identify with the LGBT community. In terms of EQUIP, the Education on Queer Issues project under the Social Issues Commission, they currently won an award for queer orientation under human rights. They need further support for this. They need to gain recognition for this. In terms of AMS executive, as president, it's a learning process. It's an educational process. This is not something I know about right now, but in terms of as a president or as a member of the executive, it's something that we would take strides to educate ourselves on. Find out why this is important to the community, find out why this is important to people that identify with the LGBT community, and find ways to further support them. Like I said, it is a learning process, but we need to, no, I'm good there. Learning process, thank you.
Thank you for the question. In terms of support that's already in place that we really support, the positive space stickers that are included in several rooms around campus, that's a great thing. And in terms of our platform, I really regret not having mentioned that. I feel like I should have mentioned that, and I'm really sorry I didn't. But in terms of our platform, we have some points in there that I think, while they're not explicitly dealing with the LGBT community, they can really help. In terms of clubs, there's a lot of clubs that offer support for these communities on campus, and we want to increase the club grants pool and increasing the methodology behind how that grant is allocated. And re-examining space allocation in terms of giving groups space on campus. I think that would also fit into supporting clubs on campus that identify with supporting LGBT communities. CFRC, it's equity programming as well that fits really well into it. That's something that's already on the go, and that's great. ORT work in terms of supporting alternative frosh weeks. There's another thing that's on the go right now that we really, really support. And so while we don't explicitly say that we're helping out the LGBT community, we believe that our platform does fall in line with efforts that take steps towards supporting them. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Jeff. I guess I'd like to first explain why it is that there wasn't one specific point within our platform regarding the LGBTQ community. And I think it is because whenever it is that we're making any decision, I think this has to be included in everything that we do. It's not about tokenizing one point and just pointing out this is what we want to do. It's about everything that we're doing as a society. It's not just about one specific thing. In terms of some of the issues that people with in this community are facing on this campus, there are many. Some of them are, for example, discrimination at HCDS in terms of STI testing. I know that's one of the things there. Another one of the things is just general awareness. There's still many issues of violence even at our campus pubs, and so that's something that still needs to be addressed. A problem is that I guess the heteronormative population at Queens is the majority population, and so a lot of these groups might feel marginalized within our community, and it's something that we need to be focusing on, is talking to these groups and facilitating what it is that we need to do to make sure that they feel in a safe space. There are many different places here at Queens that offer a safe space. I've taken the Positive Space program, for example. I think that's something that all of our commissioners and our services directors, that's something to go through. Anti-oppression training, those are the things that we need to continue doing as a society, and I think that we need to move forward in terms of continuing attending, for example, Kingston Pride. I know Kieran and TK attended this summer. I was downtown and I saw the flow that they had, and that's a way that we can support this community, supporting Queens Pride Project, supporting a Queer Orientation Week. I think that those are some of the initiatives and things that the AMS can do to support these initiatives on campus. It's a great issue, and I thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Hi, again. So given the implementation of a bottled water ban on campus this coming September and your current choices of beverage containers, how do you plan to support the implementation of this change?
Your beverages, I win.
It's a very good question, Rachel. And in fact, the other night we were the only team that didn't have plastic bottles at our table, but it's okay. We are aware of the bottled water ban. We are also aware of the water fountain audit that Queen's Sustainability has conducted recently. And if you look in our platform, we provide support for Queen's Sustainability in terms of making water fountains more accessible around campus, increasing signage so people know where they are, because you will no longer find these water bottles on campus. You will no longer have access to a $2 bottle of water, and it's not as easy as that is anymore. The number of people that can probably tell you where the closest water fountain is outside of the Queen's Center, because they're in pretty obvious places, is likely very few. There are anywhere between 70 to 150 water fountains on campus. As Queen's Sustainability told us, we just need to let students know where they are. Additionally, we need to retrofit these water fountains to include, as they're called, spigots, or those little hooks that you can stick a water bottle underneath to fill up your water bottle. Additionally, Team JDL also looked into, as we recently saw in the Commerce Building and something we saw at the University of Western Ontario, is these pretty impressive water bottle filling stations. they're expensive, they're fancy, they can give you hot water, they can give you cold water, they can even give you sparkling water. One of the problems is this is not sustainable. In order for something to be sustainable, it needs to be economical as well. And spending money on a $10,000 machine that's just going to fill up your water bottle is not sustainable at all. While you can buy a spigot that's only going to cost maybe $10, and you can retrofit that into a fountain for much cheaper. So one of the things we talked about in our platform is further support for Queen's sustainability and further support for the buildings that we have operations and management over, for increasing signage to show people where the water fountains are and to retrofit them with these water bottle filling stations. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Rachel. I'd like to point out that while RMS is powered by Powerade, oh, shoot. We are going to be ecologically responsible, and we are going to recycle these bottles immediately after this debate. Thank you. In terms of how we can address the water bottle ban, this rose out of the CES, Commission on Environment and Sustainability, and one of the initiatives that they really want to focus on is making students more aware that it's happening. And that's something that we really need to support, and we throw our weight behind. We want to see that happen. In terms of orientation, this year the Orientation Roundtable instituted having the metal water bottles given to all first years, except that they were given out during faculty orientation week, so my finers never actually got any. So I mean, one thing I'd like to see maybe is ResLife handing those out. I don't know how possible that is, but I'd like to see the finers get them. In terms of CES as well, they have a fund called Sustainability Action Fund. So if you have any initiatives you want to start and it's related to the water bottle ban on campus, they have this pool of money that keeps accumulating and people aren't using it. So please use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for your question. As we can see, TK here has his own water bottle. Duncan has told me that he's been using the same one for the last 5 days. So I don't know. In terms of how it is that we can improve this, and in terms of access to water and go about the audit that's been made, and in terms of the water bottle ban, I think that the campus has already taken the initiative a lot, along with the Commission of the Environment and Sustainability, Queen's Sustainability, in partnership with the administration. That was something that we were actually looking for in our platform, and then when we were doing the research, we realized that it was already in the works. The administration has already had a plan. They've been thinking about this water bottle ban for a couple of years now. And I know that when I'm a residence don currently, and during don training, we actually learned a lot about what's happening in terms of the water bottle ban. As Jeff mentioned, pretty much every student who participates in orientation week, except for finers, I guess, gets their own water bottle. And so by the end of your 4 years here at Queen's, everyone should technically have their own water bottle based on the past orientation week, and that's something that needs to continue. We need to let them know, we need to educate students when they come in that this water bottle is something they need to keep for the next 4 years. It is extremely important to preserve our environment, and I think that this is something that every team should be behind and in full support of the administration. I don't think there's anything that we're going to be disagreeing with. It's something we need to be working on, educating students, increasing signage, knowing where it is that these water fountains are located, and which ones the ones that are coming in are going to be placed. I think that's something vital. Otherwise, continuing with the recycling programs and assuring that students are having access to water and not getting dehydrated on campus. Thank you very much.
We will have one more question for this round.
T. Butcher, State Member at Large. This is a pretty heavy question, so follow through. According to AMS Policy Manual 3, Section 17, it is the position of AMS Assembly that provincial government lower the drinking age to 18, that the university administration should work with the AMS and other universities to lobby the government to adjust the legal drinking age of Ontario to 18. This is something that affects residences and resident staff like myself very heavily. What are your thoughts on this still being part of policy, and do you think it needs to be taken out, or are you going to advocate for this policy? Please justify your answer.
Starting with RMS.
Could you just repeat the question because it's hard to...
Okay, according to AMS Policy Manual 3, Section 17, it is the position of AMS Assembly that provincial government lower the drinking age to 18, and that the university administration should work with the AMS and other universities to lobby the government to adjust the legal drinking age of Ontario to 18. This is something that affects residences and resident staff very heavily. What are your thoughts on this still being part of policy? And do you think it needs to be taken out, or are you going to advocate for this policy? Please justify your answer.
All right. This is going to make me probably pretty unpopular, but I really don't think we should. I didn't know that was in there. To be honest, perfectly honest with you, I'm surprised that's in there. I don't think that we should lower the drinking age to 18. I just don't. And in terms of the Constitution, I think that follows onto our platform point about increasing constitutional review. I know that that's something that the current AMS exec team is already undertaking. So I'm not sure if that's one thing that they're going to be editing out. I don't think they've gotten to doing any readings of that part of the policy manuals yet. But when they do review it, or if it happens under next year, I'd like to see it removed.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Tuba. It's a policy that I remember listening about at the beginning of this year, and I thought it was, Mark mentioned that it was fairly old. I believe it was crafted in the early 90s, and it's something that us as the executive, we cannot be just trying to create policy necessarily in terms of, all right, this is what we should be doing. I think that's up to students, it's up to AMS Assembly. I think that we need to bring these policies and revise them. There are many, just like this one, there might be other parts of policy that might be out of date as well, but it is not up to us to decide how it is that we are going to go about changing a document. I think documents are in place for a reason, and when we bring them to AMS Assembly, they need to be discussed and they need to be revisited. It should be students making that decision, it shouldn't be us doing that. We're working here for students, and they should let us know what it is that they want. In terms of just like drinking age in general, I have experienced it firsthand being a residence don and having first-year students who perhaps the drinking age is 18 at their province and coming into Queens and the struggles that faces. And so I totally understand where it is that you're coming from, but I ultimately feel that it should be the students deciding, not us trying to change policy, but bringing to those bodies that are responsible for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. I didn't know that was in there, but I imagine that that was put in there during some sort of double cohort when we saw 2 years of students come into Queen's University. In terms of how I feel about it, you may argue that there are some benefits, but I see a lot of challenges. With that said, it is in our policy, and it does say that we will lobby on behalf of students to the province. With that said, students have to decide what to do with this. This isn't something that a 3-member executive can decide. We could put it to referendum, find out what students want. Do they want us to go to the provincial government to lower it, or do they not care? If they don't care, we can focus our efforts on something else, and we can simply make this change through Assembly, should Assembly see it pass. But because it does talk about provincial lobbying, it is something that should go to referendum or some other sort of consultation to students. Not necessarily referendum, maybe a poll on the AMS website, but we need to find out if this is a priority of our students, and if it is, of course, we would back it. Depending on the referendum and Assembly's feelings. However, we need to consult with students first, and if it's not a policy, then or if it's not a priority, we can focus our efforts elsewhere. Thank you for the question.
That concludes debate for the first round. We will resume in 15 minutes.